of science and spirit, many of which I do not understand. But ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Professor Brian Sinclair. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you very much, Patience. So I'm going to share my screen. So I need someone to allow me to share. It says the host has disabled screen sharing. So
the IT team should be able to sort that out for you in a few seconds.
yeah, okay, yeah, they're quick.
There.
Okay, can you see the screen?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, okay, that's good. So I'm going to get started here. I wanted to thank you, Patience, for your moderating this session, very skillfully moderating it. And by the way, I agree in terms of the female representation within the competition. But that said, I've got a number of female doctoral students from Nigeria, so I guess I'm fortunate in that way. I wanted to thank Emma for his vision and leadership throughout this process. And I also wanted to thank the Jinkai jury team members for their collegiality as well as for their expertise throughout this process. It's been really a wonderful journey that we've been on together. I wanted to acknowledge Dr. Chris Mayaki and Daniela for underscoring the importance of education to our world and the potential of young people. I was particularly moved by the presence of the award winners, representatives from the three top teams. I think it speaks a lot about the future of architecture and certainly speaks volumes to the talent in Nigeria. So congratulations. So welcome from Canada. It's indeed my honor and pleasure to be giving a short presentation today at the kind invite of Dr. Emma. I wish I was in Lagos. That was the initial plan. But that said, I'm in snowy Calgary, Canada. Given the many challenges we confront today, this talk explores some dimensions that we might consider as we map paths forward. So in a lot of ways, it's less about architecture as product and more about architecture as process. The Japanese have a term, mono no aware, and it means that there is a fleeting beauty that is once upon us and then in a flash gone. This is the Imperial Palace and the Sakura, or the Cherry Blossom Festival, that happens only very briefly in the springtime in Japan. Beauty is not only found in nature, of course, but it's also human-made. These are incense cones that are found in a Buddhist temple in Hong Kong. The flip side of beauty is, of course, ugliness. And ugliness is something that we as architects struggle with, we as society struggle with. Again, human-made, in this case, oil sands here in Canada with a remarkable environmental impact and a high ecological footprint. Another example of that ugliness, the atomic bomb being dropped on Hiroshima, in this case in Nagasaki, really targeting, in many ways, innocent civilians. We live in times where injustices are prevalent, and yet, I would argue, opportunities are abundant. This is a quote from a friend of mine, now deceased, Mediterranean, who's an Iranian economist and philosopher. And he said in his book with Chappelle, globalization has brought different cultural values into direct contact and sometimes conflict. The way to resolve these conflicts is not to pit one camp against another, for example, the West against the rest. For the human race to survive, it's now necessary to open up channels of communication for dialogue, negotiation, and the creation of values commensurate with the challenges of our own times. So architects and architecture can't see themselves as somehow outside of these contemporary challenges. In fact, we must see ourselves as empowered, as professionals who can contribute to positive change. And that's certainly the message for the young architects I work with, the architecture students. and those with us today from Nigeria. Architecture is about balance. It's about realms that are concerned with elevating emotions on one hand and addressing function on the other. It's about both sensitivity and sensibility, which is a both and proposition rather than an either or arrangement. To make sense of a turbulent world, I argue that we need to change our point of view. And this is a shot I took when I summited Mount Fuji in 2013, 3,776 meters. And the world changes when you get above the clouds and above the noise. And I argue that architects need to change their viewpoint in a pretty dramatic way. We need to understand that a broader view and a wider embrace is both timely and necessary at the present juncture. My own background tells me of the value and worth of such an embrace. My background is in neuroscience, brain research, and psychology, as Patience was mentioning, but also and equally about art, about intuition, subjectivity, design, and architecture. Our world is rich and dynamic and exciting and challenging and vital. It's about design. It's about technology. It's about pulse, culture, innovation, media, spirituality, and of course, humanity. Our times are complex, and I would argue often very, very confusing. We live protected by a thin veneer of stability, and this is Mount Asama in Japan. It's a mountain I've climbed a number of times. It's an active volcano, so you're always at the edge of this thing erupting. And I argue that in our present world, in a moment, all can unravel and all can unfold. And it's important for us to understand that and be prepared. We buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. And I took this photograph on the former Olympic housing in Munich in the athletes' village. Such chaos and uncertainty results in tremendous pain, stress, and anxiety, both as individuals and as we see in communities and countries and societies. In such an ethos, we need to establish values and vision. We need to set priorities and shape principles that will guide us forward. In all my teaching, in many countries around the globe, a common thread is this search for understanding and a quest for direction. This is a graduate human rights studio that I taught last winter here at the University of Calgary with students from around the globe. And in that search, in that quest, in a lot of ways, it's about establishing in students a worldview and a self-view. A worldview is basically allowing them to understand what's going on beyond themselves, politically and otherwise. A self-view is understanding how they fit within that equation, the types of contributions they can make, the impact they can realize. And of course, we're immersed in very difficult times for many reasons. International wars are commonplace. Regional conflicts increase. Social unrest is abundant. Racial injustice is pervasive. The infringement of human rights is everywhere. And assaults on our health and security are commonplace via pandemics, via rising disease, climate change, global warming, natural disasters, to name but a few of the challenges that we try and juggle as a society and, of course, as architects. And I argue it's critical to understand our world through lenses of systems or systems thinking. The great British essayist C.P. Snow, in his book, The Two Cultures, talked about the split between the humanities and science and the dangers that would come upon us as a civilization when that happens. And his prophecy in 1957 rings true today. A fighter jet on the left, and this is one of my wife's paintings on the right-hand side. So I argue we need to bridge the gap between art and science, the poetic and the pragmatic, the subjective, objective, feeling, thinking, humanity, technology, head, and heart. We need to bridge these gaps and heal the divides in order to move ahead in tackling complex problems. We need to grasp interrelationships and interdependencies at play. So for example, in an architecture project, when each of these components, the context, for example, authorities with jurisdiction, the consultant, us as architects, the client who's commissioning a project, whether it be government or private sector, all of these have to work. When one opts out, the system fails. When the systems run full bore and in synchronization, great things can happen. A powerful architecture, in this case, the Turning Torso by Calatrava in Malmo, and great cities can be realized, in this case, Chicago, Illinois. In the mix is the need to work with systems and the various components of those systems. Processes, politics, products, pressures, priorities, and policies. So, for example, on the political side, and I try to teach my students a lot about how to maneuver within the political ethos. There's a lot that can be realized. And this is a shot of myself and my wife in London with the former mayor of my city. And I went with the mayor to London. We spent a lot of time walking around the city in architects' offices, in government offices, using transportation systems to try and figure out how we can strengthen our city back home. And this is that city, Calgary, back home. And in the front, under construction, this is a couple of years old, is Norman Foster's building called the Bow. And when we were in London, we visited offices such as Norman Foster's offices and spent a lot of time there, as well as Nicholas Grimshaw's and others. This is an image that many of you have seen, I'm sure. It's the world at night. The lights are clearly a proxy of wealth. We deal with significantly daunting problems. Population, as was already mentioned in Nigeria, pollution, depletion of resources, destruction of environments, greed. And yet, despite all of that, as an educator and an architect, a psychologist, I find great cause for optimism for our future. Optimism about the built environment. This is Hong Kong from the peak. About our natural environment. This is Lake Louise, which is about an hour and a half's drive from my home here in Canada. And the human environment, obviously the magic that makes our cities worthwhile and our lives meaningful. This is Millennium Park in Chicago and the wonderful sculptures for the children that are in that park. I want to stress the importance of meaning. We as architects and psychologists talk about place attachment and place identity. And the places we live in, for example, Lagos or the Northern Plateau, define who we are. They shape how we feel, how we act, and how we react. So the importance of place can't be emphasized enough. The Charles River in Praha, a wonderful example of a city with a great sense of place. The Sydney Opera House by architect Utzon, which as it opened became emblematic of the country of Australia. Victoria Station in Melbourne, which on one hand is about a very pragmatic solution to make sure that the air is clean within the terminal, but at the same time is elevated to a realm of aesthetics and beauty using computational fluid dynamics. So this is this marriage I was talking about of poetics and pragmatics that helps define place. My Zeal in Frankfurt by Studio Fuchsas. And it's not only about buildings and architecture and structures, which we often get caught up with as architects and designers, but it's also about the people and the activities those people pursue within the environments we create. In the top is a Christopher Day Festival in Hamburg, Germany, and at the bottom is a night festival in Montreal, Quebec. So I talked about place and the importance of place, and we as architects talk about